Today we're going to check out a Crest 4801 stereo 2-rack space amp compared to a Powersoft T904 single rack space 4-channel amp. What's most interesting is the power density of modern amps is astronomically higher than it used to be. I mean, things have gotten smaller, louder, lighter, more powerful too, full processing and everything else. This 4801 is the smaller brother to a Crest 7001, which is a 2-rack space version. This puts out 400 watts per channel, and there was a Crest 7001 put about 600 watts per channel into 8 ohms. And those were, at the time, very high density, high power amps. They were kind of state of the art, getting that much power into so little space. This T904 is rated at 1600 watts per channel, and it's a single rack space, and it's 4 channels. So that's 6400 watts in a single rack space versus this one here, which is about 400 watts per rack space. You know, to go from 600 watts per rack space to 6400 watts per rack space is quite a jump. Furthermore, the Crest amp for 400 watts per channel, 2 channels, 800 watts, weighs 50 pounds. The T904 weighs 17 pounds. It weighs 1/3 the amount. But let's go ahead and look. Modern watts are not the same as old school watts. There's some positives and negatives to both. It's not apples to apples. There are some differentials here, and we're going to take a look at that. So I've got this cool setup here where I've got the output of the power amps. I've got a tone generator here. I've got it set up for a 50 hertz tone, and I've got a music player here, and they're going this little mixing board out into Y cables, into the amp, out of the amp, into this contraption here, which includes a light bulb and the 8 ohm load, the ability to switch between and load down one amp or the other. And what's really cool is we're going to be able to listen to the output of the amp. Now what I've done is, in series with the 8 ohm load, I've put a chunk of wire, and across that chunk of wire, I have an XLR, pin 2 and 3 XLR monitoring going to this mixing board and going into this recorder. So when I put the music into the video, you're actually going to listen to the output of the amplifier across a load. So you're going to be listening to the actual amp itself. I guess first of all, let's look at the frequency response differentials between the two amps. That's 50 volts per division. Okay, we can see it distorting and bring it down. So I'll try it right about there. Cool. Now let's see if we got any light. And oh yes, we've got some light. So this is the Crest amp. We're looking at 13 hertz. So now we're going down to 9 hertz. So you can see here at 5 hertz, 3 hertz, it's dying out. And as I bring it up to a higher frequency, 7, 9, 12, 16, and 20 hertz with that level. Now we'll just go ahead and now we're at 27K. So this is interesting. I'll drop it down to 20K. Ooh, that's the Powersoft amp is excited about that. Its fans kicked up high, but we're looking at the Crest amp, so just ignore that. And I'm at 23K, 24K, 25K, 27K, and it's flat. I didn't know these Crest amps were flat that high up. There's 200K and sweeping down to 69. Okay, so this Crest amp goes up. There's 38K. It's pretty much flat to 30K. Quite interesting. And there is the light bulb run at 23K. All right, so let's go ahead and switch over and see what we got. And let's go to the Powersoft amp, and there we go. Now we can't see a little fuzz on the waveform, probably due to the switching frequency. It should be outside of hearing range, but it's interesting to note. So it's 23 hertz. Now remember when we went down on the Crest amp to the lower frequencies, I'll go up higher here, and then I'm going to switch it down. So the low end of the Powersoft amp, we're now at 16 hertz, and we're at 13 hertz, and we're at 11 hertz, and we're at 7 hertz, 6, 5, 4, 5, 3. Okay, so this Powersoft amp definitely goes lower. So let's go ahead and compare the two. There's 3 hertz. I see a little distortion there, but 4 hertz. We'll go to the Crest amp, and it's much lower. And we'll go up to Powersoft amp at around 10 hertz, and the Crest amp. So the Crest amp is rolling off around 16 hertz, are pretty similar. So the Powersoft amp does have some low frequency response below 20 hertz or below 15 or 10 hertz that we're not seeing on the Crest amp. Kind of cool. Let's go up high. We'll go up. There's 16K, and we're on the Powersoft amp. I'll bring that up. And the fan's kicking in, and we can open this up to look at the waveform. And 17K, going up higher, 21K. And now here we are at 22K, and it is rolling off. And we'll go to the Crest amp, and it's clean. And so the very high frequency response, let's go back down to 20K. And 19 is 20K. And we're just beginning to see the Powersoft amp roll off at 20K, but they're both doing it quite well. Although the Powersoft amp fans do like to run faster at 20K. Okay, frequency response test between the two amps. Let's do a quick power output test. We'll start with the Crest amp, and I got this 50 cycle tone here, so we'll go ahead and bring that up. There it is. I'll listen to it on the headphones, and we'll listen for this to clip. We'll get approximate power. We're not trying to get the exact power output. That's not our goal. Our goal is to look at the difference in new watts and old watts. You hear it distorting? I'll bring it down just below distort. I'll turn the light bulb on and off just to show you it doesn't affect it. It's a small percentage of the load, and we're actually listening to the output of the amp. I can clean that up. All right, so now let's do a quick calc on that. It says 55.9 volts, 55.9, enter. It says 391 watts. That's close to the 400. We can probably get a little more if I just turn this up a little bit. 57. So let's try that. 57. And you probably didn't hear any difference whatsoever. And all of a sudden now we have 406 watts. So we're right where we need to be, output power-wise, into 8 ohms off the Crest amplifier. We can look at our peak-to-peak voltage and calc that out, and it'll come out to very close to the same. Let's look at the Powersoft amp. A little riz right there. All right, so that's where we're sitting at 65.8 volts. 65.8 volts. 541 watts. So this thing is rated at 1600 watts into 8 ohms, but it's only putting out 541 continuous sine wave. Is it not meeting spec? Well, if you read the spec, it does not say that it puts out continuous power. It puts out a peak power there, or a pulse power there. So let's go ahead and look at that. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to speed up this sine wave here. Let's see what happens when I switch to the Powersoft amp from the Crest amp. Now, if you look at the scope there, you can see that we have a much higher voltage, and then it drops down. So let's try that again. And that voltage is almost 300 volts. When I switched over, when I put the continuous power into the Powersoft amp, it only put out 550 watts continuous. But when I switched over to it, as soon as it came in, it put out 3 different things. It put out this kind of burst up here, and then it dropped down, and then it came across for a little while, and then it dropped down a little further. We can look at that again. There's our burst, and it's high, and then it drops down again right there, just slightly. There's 3 different voltages there. Well, this third voltage is the 65.8 volts. So it's able to put out a massive amount of power for a very short period of time. It's putting it out for about 250 to 300 milliseconds. So now what's the difference here? We show that 540 watts versus this 400 watts. We show it only a little bit louder with the RMS, but the peak voltage is much higher. Let's listen to some music and see how this truly affects the real world. Cool, and thank you JT O'Neill and Riarosa Band for this song, Better Than Nothing. So good to be able to have music to play on YouTube without getting flagged, and so kind to get this. The sine wave was just this solid signal across, but we look at the music, it's actually got these pulses in there. The question is, are old watts better than new watts? And if so, when and what for? And we are listening to the output of the amp here, the Crest amp, and we're just hitting clips. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit. There, we're clean on both amps. And now I'm going to switch to the Powersoft amp. Crest and so let's see. Even though the continuous power of one was 400 watts versus 540 watts, the peak power, that little blurb where it just hung high, that's huge. That's really what gives us this volume boost, because the average energy in music is a fraction. What's the difference in sound between 540 watts and 400 watts? Let's do that on the Powersoft amps. So at 540 watts, we're looking for about 65.8 here. And if we go down to 400 watts, about 57 volts. So I'm going to bring this down to 400 watts. Right there. And back up to 540. So that might be interesting as well. In order to get 3 dB, you have to double the amount of watts. So 400 to 800 watts gives you 3 dB. So the difference between 400 500 watts on the output of an amp is borderline imperceptible. The difference between 500 watts and 2000 watts, that's 500 to 1000, 3 dB, and 1000 to, that's 6 dB. 6 dB is a significant difference. 10 dB is supposed to be twice as loud. All right, so new power versus old power, 8 ohms. Crest versus the Powersoft. Power density, weight, drastic changes, and the perceptible level. Even though the average power is almost the same or very close, the perceptible level difference is huge. I mean, it's much louder. Cool. Thanks for joining me.